Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of my new podcast, Multifamily Chronicles. My guest today is Tara Rice. She's a veteran of our industry. She's been in the industry for 30 years, and she is currently the Chief Communications Officer of Swift Bonnie. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here with you for your inaugural podcast recording of Multifamily Chronicles. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you. Let's start by just have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background and about what you're currently doing.
Sure. Okay. So as you said in my intro, this is actually my 30th year in multifamily. So that makes me an old timer for sure, which is always surprising to me because it doesn't feel that way to me. These 30 years have gone very quickly. But let me just tell you a little bit about my background. Like probably many of the listeners of this podcast, my career path in multifamily was totally accidental. Being in this space is not something that I dreamed of as a child. I didn't even know that multifamily was a career that existed until I rented my first apartment. And at that time, they were hiring for a leasing consultant in the leasing office. So I completely stumbled into that role. And I readily admit that I took that position thinking, oh, this looks easy enough. I'll do this until I find a real job. Not realizing at all that it indeed was a real job and a job with unlimited potential for growth. So I quickly got the bug and thoroughly enjoyed that position and moved up the ladder on the multifamily side and ultimately was my own property manager, regional manager, multi-site manager, and then moved into a training role on multifamily operations. And then I guess it was probably around 1998, I made the leap over to the bright side, as we like to refer to it, the supplier side of the fence. And for many years, I was part of the team at Grace Hill, where we were involved in learning and development with multifamily. And then for the past several years, I've been a part of the team over here at Swift Bunny. And Swift Bunny was founded by Joe Bailey, who also founded Grace Hill. So he and I have been partnered together for a number of years. And it's fun to be working with some familiar friends over here at Swift Bunny. And what we do, if you don't mind a quick little plug, because not everyone is familiar with our company, I'm sure. But what we do over here at Swift Bunny is we work with multifamily companies to engage their employees. And what we offer are confidential employee feedback surveys. So we help management companies find out how their teams are feeling, what's working for them, what's not working for them, so that they can make improvements and help to boost the satisfaction for their team members and also their loyalty. So we ultimately want to help them drive down employee turnover and improve their operations. So that's been a really fun adventure for me.
It's great that you're telling us a little bit about your company and what are you doing over there, because one of the things I want to talk to you about is really the hottest topic that it's just taking over not just our industry but all industries in general. And the topic is the Great Resignation. What is it? How does it affect our industry, and how did we get here?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the hot topic for not just multifamily, but for every industry. You're 100% right. Yeah, it is a really trying time to be in the position of trying to staff a community right now, or multiple communities. Really to try to staff any workplace is very, very challenging. So let me just back up for a moment and say staffing has always been a challenge in multifamily. We suffer from very high employee turnover in multifamily, and we always have. And that is a challenge that I think that we haven't really addressed head on in multifamily. But now that the whole world is facing employee turnover stresses, I think it's really coming to the forefront. But even prior to what's been billed as the Great Resignation, multifamily has experienced employee turnover levels on average that are about twice other businesses. So we've just kind of accepted that as normal, and it's anything but normal. And I think it's completely fixable if we just put our attention and our focus on it. But let's talk about what's happening at this particular moment, the Great Resignation. So we are experiencing staffing shortages. There are just flat out not enough bodies, never mind qualified bodies, to fill the vacant positions. And in multifamily, I think that's there's a couple of factors here. You know, during the height of the pandemic, I think that the normal attrition, folks who normally would have left their jobs, maybe that was slightly depressed. Maybe they were unwilling to leave because everything was so uncertain in the world. You know, so some of that attrition, I think, is kind of pent up, and it's happening right now. Now that not that we're past the pandemic, but things are a little bit more normalized. Also, certainly, multifamily work has gotten a lot harder in the last 2 years. The pandemic has just made working on site more challenging than it ever has been. So for that reason, I think we're seeing a lot of folks heading for the exit and trying to figure out, where can I go work that might not be so high stress, maybe not feel quite so unsafe, because the pandemic has certainly raised safety concerns for folks as well. There's some discomfort with interacting with residents, going into their apartments, et cetera. And, with the staffing shortages that all industries are facing right now, job temptations are plentiful. People are seeing that other employers are hiring. So even if they maybe under normal circumstances might have been satisfied to stay put, they're being tempted by job offers and opportunities and higher salaries and sign-on bonuses from all sorts of sources, not just within our industry, but outside of our industry as well. So it is a multifaceted problem, and it's probably the biggest challenge that operators are facing right now.
What are a few ways that you can think of suggesting to address this issue, to ease the pain a little bit? What would what are the maybe your top 3 or 5 suggestions to how to address this phenomenon?
Right. Well, I think it really starts with trying to make sure that you can stop the bleeding. And what I mean by that is try to make sure that your existing employees do not leave. I think that should be priority number 1 for multifamily leaders right now, is to try to reduce employee turnover, because with the labor shortage that we have right now, the very last thing that you need are any more open seats at your company. And this is really challenging because I think that many folks are focusing as job number 1 being filling those empty seats. That is also extremely important, but it can't come at the expense of taking care of the folks who are still there hustling for you and trying to get the job done. So yes, fill the empty positions, but also make sure the folks who are there with you don't also leave. And those folks are under great strain right now, so they deserve all of the attention that you can possibly shower on them. They need all the resources, they need all the help, they need leadership's ear, so that they feel like they're being heard and their needs are being met, because you don't want those folks to be tempted by the other job opportunities as well. So employee retention, I think, has to be the top priority for organizations right now. One of the big things that I think is, with so many communities being short-staffed, it is really, really difficult on the folks who remain. They are shouldering so much extra responsibility. So anything that you can do to try to help them get the job done, and that probably means contracting for some extra labor, maybe temporary help, in order to ease that burden, because otherwise you're just going to burn out the existing team. Tell me if that matches with what you're seeing out in the trenches right now, Adrian.
It actually is. It's very interesting. I want to go back a little bit and say,
Sure.
I've done a poll on LinkedIn, and in a poll, I've asked people, have you looked for an opportunity within, the last month, the last 6 months, the last, 7 to 12 months? And the poll has not been closed yet, but the results are pretty, they're pretty amazing. Like the percentage of people that looked for an opportunity, again, it's not a scientific survey. It's just my connections and my connections that I could see, and whoever wanted to, participate in a poll. But the percentage is getting close to 80% of people that actually look for an opportunity within the past 6 months. So within the past 6 months, 4 out of 5 people that wanted to respond actually consider different opportunities. So I think that's very, very telling about the times that we're living in. And go back to your question, right? Can it be solved? What am I seeing? Yes, I actually have personal experience with this matter. Right before COVID started, I'll say probably not right before, but about a year, I had the opportunity to actually build a facilities team for a management company. I was hired as a director of maintenance. I was allowed to hire support personnel, and between myself and 5 other individuals, we serviced a portfolio of 25 properties across 6 states, southeastern states. The way this helped is that we improve employee retention. We're able to provide a very, very high quality of service to the residents. Our service request pending numbers at week closing on Friday evenings stayed in single digits average per property for 85 consecutive weeks. And this includes about most of this 85 weeks were during the pandemic. So under all this, pressure and against all the adversity, our teams were able to hold it together, and not only that, but actually provide excellent customer service. So this is an example that things could happen out there. They could be done if there's a will to do it, for sure. So that's my personal experience.
So that is so interesting to me, and I want to ask you, during that exercise, in that experience, how was your employee turnover with your team?
It went down tremendously. So I wanted to say that at the very beginning, when we start building, first of all, I had to build KPIs, because KPIs were not existing in that organization. Everybody knew that, we went through a lot of pain. It was a very painful moment for us as an organization. But nobody could really pinpoint why, because we didn't have measurables. So I first started creating these KPIs, and when we started seeing numbers and see the productivity of each team, it just kind of revealed where the issues were, and we were able to start, improving the quality of the work. And that actually generated at the beginning a very, very high turnover. I think, this accountability piece that we introduced was not necessarily welcome by some individuals. So, naturally the change happened. But then as soon as we got stabilized, I think that we reduced employee turnover by 50%. So what I mean by that, the first year that I was with the organization and we started implementing KPIs and everything, our turnover rates were incredible, were 80%. 80% the first year in maintenance. That's just unheard of. Well, the second year, they got cut in half. Once we got the processes down, once we got the teams in place, the support team in place, and everything worked like it's supposed to, our turnover rates were cut in half. So that's, in my book, pretty amazing.
It is amazing. And also, I think that you can connect that to the results that you were able to achieve. You know, with your lower turnover, guess what you've got? You've got expertise, you have experienced staff, you have competence. And these folks are able to get those work orders completed satisfactorily without callbacks. And so it's all connected there. So the resident satisfaction, I would anticipate, probably climbed as well.
Absolutely. And there's also another thing too, when you have people that tend to stick around for longer, right? You build you build a certain sense of community, and also it releases a lot of the pressure on the team. How does that happen? So, we start with a higher level of service request pending, and if the same team works really hard and gets them down, down, down to a lower manageable number and keeps them there at a manageable level, you're not into a reactive mode anymore. You're basically able to turn the tables and actually from a reactive mindset to go to a proactive. So basically, you get your service request down to as close as possible to zero, right? And you're ready for whatever comes at you versus letting the events to plan the day for you. For example, we have 3 floods today. We had to, service 15 ACs. Where are we gonna go first? That is not the type of the type of environment that you want to have, but it takes time. It takes an effort to get there. And I do want to say, Kiara, that people might think, well, we can't really afford this. Let me tell you that every company that's I'll say decent size can afford, and this is how. Let's say that my company has 10 properties in a certain market, right? And we had to look at how many maintenance openings we have average throughout a 6-month period. And I say that for this portfolio of 10 properties for this market, we average about 5 openings any given time. Okay, well, if we know that we have this vacancy, right, there's payroll available, because obviously when we have 5 openings any given time, the payroll for 5 individuals is not being spent. Okay, so this is money that we could spend. The way I would spend it is to hire personnel that will be managed at a corporate level, right? To create a facilities team, just like I actually did in practice. And you don't have to hire 5 people. Literally, if you hire 2 individuals for that particular market, that they're very well paid and they know what they're doing, like, you would not feel like you're really missing this many bodies. Like, literally, you won't feel that way at all. These 2 individuals should be able to absorb the work of 3, 4, or 5 people. It's pretty amazing the stuff and the impact that only a few individuals could make. Again, with under the circumstance that they're the right individuals, they have the right mindset, the right skill set, and they're all about executing, and they're directed the right way. Like, it's not only about having the resources, but how you use the resources, right, in a most efficient way possible. So it could be done, and again, with no extra financial effort on a management side. I know that there's a concern, and some management companies will say, well, what are we gonna do when we have no vacancies? How we gonna distribute this payroll? Well, I'll say, if you really gonna ever be in that situation, that's a great problem to have, not having any vacant positions. I said, let's cross that bridge when we get there. And I could promise you that even if that's the case and it happens, there's just so many other things that we typically contract out that these individuals, the floating team, the relief team, the facilities team, typically they could do. So you don't contract that stuff out. You really take more stuff in house. You could do preventive maintenance. There's a lot of value that individuals like this could provide to any property management, to any company, any group.
Oh, that's really fascinating. And yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly with your comment about that is a good problem to have. and it probably feels like a complete fantasy right now with the staffing shortage that most folks are facing right now. They can't even imagine having that sort of a good problem. I think most leaders would say, bring on that kind of a problem.
Yes, and this kind of brings me to the next question, and or the next topic, I should say, right? That I'd like to discuss. I think everything um, revolves around company culture in general, and I always use the terms micro and macro. What do I mean by this? Micro is a small environment. It's like the site level environment, right? And who creates this environment? The people that belong to the environment, right? Of course, you have regional level involvement and everything that contributes to a certain type of culture that you have at the site level, but for the most part, it's the folks that work together on site. That's your micro, right? And then macro, it's the company as a whole. And I think that really this is the number one thing that has to change, has to be looked at in order to get to higher retention rates for our employees. Do you agree?
100% agree. And it matters in large ways and small, company culture. And first of all, let me start with a definition, because I think that company culture or workplace culture, I think it can be kind of a nebulous concept. Folks don't know exactly what it means. And let me just spell it out in a very, very simple way. And for this, I give a nod to the educator Jill Christensen, whom I heard speak several years ago, and she's so inspiring. But she just distills it down to something that is so easily understood. Company culture, very simply, is how do we do things around here? How do we do things around here? That's the company culture. And it is how leadership treats everybody at the site level, everyone at every level, all the way down to how the communities operate. And it includes, how do we talk to people? How does the manager speak to the service team? Is it with respect and appreciation, or is it with contempt? Do they treat their service team members like they are hired help, like they are slaves? So this all contributes to the company culture and how people feel about being a part of that team. So how do we do things around here? How do we treat people? All of that matters in big ways and in small, and it can make the difference in terms of whether folks are willing to stick around. And this is what we hear, Adrian, in our employee surveys. People speak to this, and they may not necessarily use the phrase company culture, but they speak to how they're treated. So whether their efforts are recognized or appreciated, do people even notice the work that they are doing? That matters. That matters a lot. And in fact, that's one of the levers I think leaders can really push in order to drive up retention of their employees, is just to take the time to acknowledge the work that team members are doing and say thank you. Just to have more conversations with every individual on their team. Another piece of company culture that I think matters a lot is access to resources and tools and support that folks need. We hear so many comments, just a real sense of frustration that it is really hard for team members to get their work done because there's so much red tape, so many restrictive policies around approvals. I was looking through some comments on employee surveys just yesterday, and I saw a trend with folks saying that they don't have the ability, they don't have the power or the authority to do any sort of approvals on site. And it is incredibly frustrating. They have to turn to their regional to get anything done. And to me, that's such a bottleneck. I would encourage leaders to take a really close look at their policies and their procedures and make sure that they're not getting in the way of employees being able to deliver good service to their residents, because those were the complaints that I was seeing.
It's very fascinating that you're mentioning this. From personal experience, I could completely agree that this is one of the issues that the sites are facing. Like there's some adversity against is perceived as, like you said, bottlenecking is probably the right word, right? Somebody up the top at the top, they're bottlenecking all this, and we can't get stuff done because we can't get the proper approvals. So
Mhm.
my thing to anybody, at a higher level is, okay, we are hiring community managers and service managers. These individuals are in charge of 60, 70, 80 million dollars worth of real estate. They are, okay? So if we hire them, we give them this huge, like tremendous responsibility to take care of this piece of real estate that's so valuable, right? Why not just trusting them with making the right decisions? Why not just allowing them to make mistakes while we make it unacceptable not to learn from them? Okay, I will say, of course, people have to be allowed to make mistakes, but they have to learn from them. You can make the same mistake over and over again. That could not be, a great thing for the business. And just by comparison, and I used this in the past in my conversations with others for service managers. So you hire this, individual for service manager, you give them, 60, 70 million dollars worth of real estate on hand and say, you do this, you take care of, you take care of maintenance. Okay. So by comparison, let's say someone that's a money advisor, right? Someone that advises people what to do with their money. If you hear of someone, managing $60 million worth of other people's money, that's a very accomplished person, right? You don't meet those individuals too often. Why is it different for a service manager?
Mhm.
How do we? I think the perception, the way we look at this individual has to really change. If we're not really going from treating them like we have to micromanage, we have to oversee and manage everything that they do, to, okay, we're gonna empower you because that's what we hire you for. What's the whole point of having a service manager? I should say, if somebody is not really trusting the individuals with, with making the right decisions for the asset, I'll say probably they're not the right individuals for the job. uh, that's what I would say. But if you really trust that person, if you really hire them and you think they're qualified for the job, just let them do the job. And like you said earlier, just stay out of their way. They know what they're
It's
doing.
That's
They
right.
know
And,
what they're doing.
you know, there's another piece to that frustration that we hear a lot about as well. It is not only that the folks on site, whether it's the service director or the manager, are not empowered to make decisions. That's one level of frustration. But then the second level is whoever they need to go to get that approval is not responsive. So we hear that all the time, that they are waiting, they're in limbo, looking for authorization, waiting for a callback, waiting for a response from somebody else within the company. So it's just so interesting to me. I think in our business, we're really laser focused on being responsive to our resident customers and our prospect customers. But I think that we really fall down when it comes to taking care of our employee customers and our coworkers. So we need to be, as leaders, responsive to our employees as well, because we're really getting in the way of them being able to deliver for residents.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Things definitely have to change, because if they don't change, we can't really expect a different result if we're gonna do things the same way.
Right.
We've
And
got.
these are the frustrations that cause people to be tempted by other job offers. Yeah, they really do. We want to dial down the frustration level for our teams if we expect them to stick around.
Absolutely, absolutely. One other topic, and due to the time that we have left, Kiara, is going to be our last topic for the day, right?
Sure.
It's gonna be. I wanted to ask you, what do you see in the surveys, the employee surveys, in regards to the on-call expectations, like what a person is expected to do while on call, and then the compensation for the on-call. I'm asking this because I'm a very close follower of Facebook maintenance-related groups, and this is probably the top complaint that maintenance professionals have in our industry is the on-call, the fact of being on call. But I think that comes in secondary is just how they get compensated, or I should say how they don't get compensated for the on-call. I think the norm is that if you're gonna be on call, you're gonna come out at 2 o'clock in the morning because you have a flood. You're gonna spend maybe 2 hours, right, addressing that, let's say, and then you go back home. And then the next day, you're gonna have to leave 2 hours earlier. And what I'm getting, my personal, the feedback that I'm getting is that our guys do not want to be sent home. They like to be paid for the time. If I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, like this is time that I earn, okay? Let me get paid for that and let me come to work regular schedule for 8 hours and pay me the time, pay me the overtime. I want to know what you're seeing in the surveys because I'm very, very interested in this type of.
Yes. So you are 100% right that this is definitely a pain point for folks on the service side, how their company handles the on-call procedure. But I have mostly anecdotal evidence here from conversations that we've had with clients and with others in the industry here about what seems to be working well for some operators. And I will say I think this is going to vary. I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. I think it depends on your team and your portfolio and, how geographically dispersed you are, et cetera, et cetera. But first and foremost, I think leaders need to find out how their team feels about whatever their current system is for compensating for on-call. Chances are there's some room for improvement there. But what I am hearing is similar to what you just voiced, Adrian, that it's the least fun aspect of the job. So leaders are smart to try to figure out a way to actually make it actually a benefit for maintenance teams. If they have to be on call, let's make it a benefit. And what I mean by that is let's make it good for their wallet. So compensate them appropriately. We did see one management company who, they recognized that this was the biggest pain point that they were hearing in their surveys. And so they assembled a team to try to figure out how can we make this better for our service teams. And they wound up paying an additional, I think it was several $100 for the weeks that the individuals were on call. Well, guess what? It all of a sudden shifted from people not wanting to be on call to people dying to be on call because they were interested in having that extra money in their paycheck. So that might not be the right solution for every portfolio, but it worked well for this team and it changed it from a negative to a positive. But I hear a lot about folks feeling really nickeled and dimed about only getting paid for 15 minutes when they were on call, so I've seen leaders tell me that minimum pay is something that has gone over well with their team. So for example, if you respond to a call, you're going to get at least an hour of pay, even if it only took you 15 minutes. So that may be something that works. But again, I think it really is specific to the team. And I think it's important that the team has a voice in the solutions that are put into place. And then you're going to wind up with a program that is well received by your team members. And perhaps, they may even be enthusiastic about it if you can get it lined up properly in a way that they feel well compensated.
I'm glad that you mentioned this, that they want to be heard. It really goes back to people not feeling like they're invisible. Their feedback matters because they matter.
100%. And the worst thing you can do is just decide something on high in the ivory tower of the corporate office and push it down because you'll miss the mark and the teams, will resent that. Instead, listen to them and they'll help you come up with the right solution.
Yeah, reality is what I've learned over the years. And, I've been taught lessons, like real life lessons by site team members, right? There were situations where I imagined that, solution for a problem was designed outside of the, like out of my office. And then when I presented, when I asked for feedback, I actually proved to be wrong myself. I actually said, well, this is right. Like this makes sense. Not the way I envision it. So it really all comes down to go to your people because they have most of the solutions for the problems. Like you just have to listen to them. Like listen not to respond to provide a response, but listen to understand. And you will be amazed once that mindset changes and you're really willing to listen to your teammates to understand how much better things could get.
You are 100% right. And I think that's the ticket right there to reducing employee turnover is listening. Listening, because unless you're doing that on a regular basis, you don't even know what's frustrating your team members. You can make assumptions, but those assumptions could be way off base. So the listening is critically important.
Absolutely right. Well, Kara, we could have gone for a couple of hours easily right here.
Yeah, I agree.
I just like to try to keep it during our listeners and commute, right? So around 30, 40 minutes. I would love to continue the conversation. I have so many other topics that, we haven't even touched on. I would love to have you back in the future. Before we wrap up, I'd like to have you have the last word and just kind of, what would you like to add in closing?
Oh, goodness. Well, first of all, thank you again for the invitation. Thanks to the listeners for sticking with us here. And I would love to come back because I agree with you. There's so much more to talk about. But, to everyone who's listening here, I hope you can hang in there because this staffing shortage will not last forever. In fact, I'm already seeing some rays of light in the labor numbers that are being published today. We're promising. I think things are getting a little bit better slowly but surely. And multifamily it remains to me a really wonderful place to make a living. There is so much opportunity here. So we can get through this. We can absolutely get through this. And the best way to ride through this great resignation storm, I think, is to take care of the people who work with you and who work for you. Do everything you can to make sure that their needs are met, and they will deliver for you and for the company and for your residents. So I look forward to brighter days when we don't have to struggle so much with employee turnover. But I really think that the struggle that we're facing right now is helping multifamily operators to learn some really important lessons about taking care of our employees.
Yeah, I think really we're facing a turning point. And the way I see this current situation, I won't call it a crisis. I will see it as a huge opportunity to make things better for all of us, for the businesses, because it's not just the employee that benefits from the changes, but it's also the businesses. If you have happy employees, you're gonna have higher productivity and you're gonna run a better business. That's just the bottom line. It's been proven, and it really is a winning proposition. Take care of your people. Kara, again, thank you so much for joining me to our to the first episode of my video podcast. I hope you all enjoy watching our conversation. I hope to have you back here, Kara, soon to continue the conversation because there's just so much more to cover.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me.